If you thought my journey with databases was chaotic, you're not ready, because the hell I've gone through with captchas for T3 chat has been absurd. When I first started T3 chat, we didn't have much in terms of restrictions, because we also didn't offer too much in terms of things you would want to exploit. We only offered GPT-4o Mini and DeepSeek V3 when we first launched. Those models are really cheap, so I didn't think people would try to abuse it. And then someone submitted 300,000 requests in the course of 30 minutes. If you're popular, put captchas on your things seriously. I was terrified when this happened, and the recommendation I got initially seemed really good. Try out Cloudflare Turnstile. It's free to use, and you can throw it in your app, use it to make a token, add it to the request, and you're good to go. Smooth sailing. It was weird, though. We ended up moving from Turnstile over to ReCaptcha V3 because we had a lot of issues that we will be discussing. ReCaptcha solved most of the problems, as annoying as it was to integrate, but it still had rough edges. And the more I looked into them and the more I experimented and tried other things, the more I heard people mention hCaptcha as the only reasonable option. So I ended up going from Turnstile to ReCaptcha V3 to hCaptcha, and the experience I had with each of these was wildly different. I'm excited to dive into this with you guys, not just because I think it's useful info for people building captchas and rate limiting into their services, but because it might help you understand how these things work, the technical details of identifying unique users, and how to think about preventing abuse in your services and systems. Or maybe, if you're just a user of the web, why it's so annoying to beat some of these stupid captchas. I'm excited to dive in, but someone has to cover the bill because these services are not cheap. So quick word from today's sponsor, and then we'll dive into the hell I have been through. There's a lot of great AI app builders nowadays, but most of them are really focused on React. What if there was one that wasn't? What if there was one that was so deeply embedded in the open source community that it understood every stack? Obviously including React, but also Svelte, Astro, and even mobile apps with React Native. Well, you would need a company that deeply understands what all of these frameworks need. You know, a company that might have built an editor in the browser before. Yes, we're talking about StackBlitz and their incredible AI app builder, Bolt. This was the first one of these app builders to really blow me away. I still remember when Eric stopped by my apartment to show me. We just sat in my kitchen, he opened it up and was like, "What do you think?" I didn't know what to think until I tried it, and now it's my go-to AI app builder, especially if I'm using a different stack. You can build something with ShadCN and Next.js if you want, or you can hop into other different tech that might make more sense for what you're doing. I'm still partial to Astro for things like blogs, and they had a great template that I was able to quickly change from a basic blog to Space Cats Assemble. Cosmic Cats is weirdly stunning, and it was able to do all the CSS, all the additional changes, all the chaos to get this right. And best part, it handles responsiveness too. We can zoom in like we would be on mobile, and it looks great. It's not easy to get that all working. Unlike a lot of the other AI app editors, they have a good full code editor built in because it's StackBlitz. So of course they do. This is a full VS Code Monaco editor experience, like one that you could actually work in every day. And even better, you can highlight an area, you can ask what it does, or you can ask it to change it. It's super easy to go through line by line, grab a section, and tell Bolt to do something different, like you would in an editor like Cursor. But this is for getting a real project started. And if it was stuck in here forever, that would suck. But thankfully, these guys know better. Not only is there an export button where you could download the code or throw it in StackBlitz, they also have integrations for connecting to both Stripe and Supabase, and most importantly, a deploy button. So you can take this app and automatically deploy it out to Netlify so you can show it to somebody else. Something I should have mentioned before, I just did all of this on the free tier. So if you haven't given it a shot today, why not? Check them out today at soydev.link/bolt. So let's start with Turnstile. Specifically, what was wrong with Turnstile? There's a couple different categories I want to focus on for each of these integrations. First is setup. How hard is it to get set up? Second is pricing. How much money do I have to spend? And the third is reliability. Primarily false positives. How often will this flag our users? And arguably one of the more important ones, user sentiment. How does it make people feel? Does it block them in ways that are really annoying? Does it block certain users that it shouldn't? How do people feel about it? Is it private enough, or is it storing data that it shouldn't? Vibe check, generally. I started on Turnstile because a good friend recommended it to me. Funny enough, the person who created the browser I've been using for my dev work recently, Helium. Don't look it up yet. It's really hard to get a hold of. More info on Helium coming soon. The setup was fine. For a Cloudflare product, it was better than expected, but I found it kind of annoying to integrate in React. There's an official React Turnstile library, but I had a lot of expectations. It seemed like it really wanted you to use like their component and include it in things like forms that you would want to submit. It could auto-generate tokens for you, which was particularly important because that's the behavior I wanted. I wanted to have a token that was ready to go whenever I needed it, so that when a user submitted a message, I could attach the token to the submit to verify if they were a real user or not. Setting this up was annoying for a very dumb reason. When I was setting it up during dev, Turnstile was doing an annoying thing to test if your browser is real. The goal of a CAPTCHA isn't to actually verify if you're human, it's make it expensive if you're not human. It's relatively easy to just curl a website and get its HTML and then hit random endpoints through your terminal. It's a lot harder to simulate a browser, and it's much more expensive to add the tests that we're all familiar with CAPTCHAs. Things like the little set of pictures, you have to click the one that doesn't fit, or rotate to make everything align. AI is not that good at these things. It can do them, it just costs money and real GPU power to do. So the goal of a CAPTCHA isn't to make it so robots cannot do the thing that the humans do. It's to make it expensive enough that it's not worthwhile for the robots to get access to those things. One of the ways Turnstile did this was checking for a thing that is relatively hard to simulate. It used browser debugging. Okay, that's really annoying. I wanted to actually see it. If you ever use the debugger in your code, you know when you open up the console what it does. It pulls you to the specific line in the specific file whenever that code runs. This made deving against Turnstile super annoying because when I had my console open and I sent a message, it would immediately pull me into the source file in the files tab inside of my dev tools. It was so obnoxious. And since a lot of my users are devs, a lot of them would have the console open to check the network resources and play with things. And whenever they did, it made the app obnoxious because it would halt whenever it hit that debug step in order to pull up a specific thing in the code. Very annoying, just stupid thing to have to deal with in your dev experience. Okay, here is when I added Turnstile. Profile component. So how long ago was this? This is January 11th. This is almost 5 months ago. That's crazy. It's been so long. The backend side was really easy to implement. You just take the token off the input, you throw it over at challenges.cloudflare.com, and you get a result. Problem was on the other side. Here we had the turn protection component. Uses user info, early escapes if you're signed in. Originally, we had signed out users as the only ones that were turnstyled. We ended up moving to all free users signed in or out to prevent abuse. And then we would render the turnstile component that would, on success, set the token to be this token that it would generate. And we used the next public turnstile key to do it. This all seemed really nice and simple to implement, even if the documentation didn't help a whole lot there. The problem I ended up running into was the difference between invisible CAPTCHAs and not invisible ones. In this demo I showed before, we have the verifying success thing here. I did not want that in the UI. We didn't even have a place in the UI that it would make sense to put. So I was trying to do what was called an invisible CAPTCHA, a CAPTCHA that relies primarily on device characteristics and behaviors in the browser to determine the likelihood somebody is human. Invisible CAPTCHAs turn out to not be super reliable. So when I set it to be invisible, which by the way, you cannot do in code, you can only do that in the dashboard, and you can only have one mode set for a given turnstile key. I think they might have improved this since, but at the time it was really, really egregious. It was bad enough that we were getting non-stop reports. I thought I'd implemented something wrong, so I looked through everything, combed every line, and the official recommendation effectively came down to, you need to have the checkbox rendering in challenge mode if you want users to pass more often. I couldn't find a way to do a hybrid mode where it was invisible by default, but would prompt you if you didn't pass the check, because they don't check if you pass or not on client. The client has no idea if it passed or not. It would be way too easy to game it. The client just does a test, generates something, and sends it to the server. The server decides if you passed or not. So I'd have to build a whole separate pipe where we try and verify the token. If we fail to verify it, you get a pop-up that is the visual version. You then verify that, and if you succeed, I write it to local storage for some amount of time, and then we use that for future stuff. I was writing so much code to try and get this all to work. And the more I looked into it, the more hell I was dealing with, the more I would see other people complaining about the same thing. Tim here is a good friend. He works at Social Blade. And when they had the invisible mode on for Social Blade, over 30% of their requests, sometimes as high as 50%, were failing the turnstile checks. That's crazy. When this is over to the challenge mode, where it actually shows the user a challenge, their error rates plummeted, like down to less than 10% more often than not. Obviously, they're getting scraped a lot, so they're going to see spikes here and there. But that is a hilarious gap but it's a hilarious gap that then makes the user experience worse. And if you don't want it to make the average user experience worse, I hope you're ready to write a hell of a lot of code and pay a fee in order to have more than one turnstile option in your code base and have two weird split paths that are not fun to maintain. I went down this path real far. And if I'm honest, the reason I did it is because Cloudflare's pricing on Turnstile is incredible. It costs $0. If you want more than 2 Turnstile keys in your Cloudflare account, you have to pay for the enterprise accounts. But if you're just setting this up quickly on a one-off site, it's free. It's not cheap, it's free. That's why it was recommended to me, because it was an open source developer building an app that needed this, that couldn't afford to pay a ton of money for hCaptcha or ReCaptcha. Worked well for them to an extent, worked very poorly for us. I was not happy. I still very much see a future for Turnstile. It could absolutely get really good. But right now, it is not in the state that I was happy with. And then something important happened. We moved to ReCaptcha V3, but the reason why is a little more complex than just being unhappy. Because ReCaptcha V3 is not super cheap. ReCaptcha V3 is free for up to 10,000 assessments per month. But after that, you have to pay $1 per 1,000. That's not cheap. It's not super expensive, but it's not cheap either. That's a lot of money to spend to check tokens just to see if a user's real or not. As such, was not excited to pay this fee, especially because we started running these on every single user check. The amount of messages that go through T3 chat, this would have been like tens of thousands of dollars. But there were a couple things that were important. The first was that we decided to only do this on unpaid users. Point 2 is that we decided we could verify a user instead of a message. So I could verify that you are a human and know that for a certain amount of time with a token that would work for a bit and then expire. And 3, probably the most important point, we had a shitload of Google credit. GCP is a very generous platform as a startup, and they gave us a lot of money of credit as a Y Combinator company. And when I realized that would apply for ReCaptcha, I decided we should give it a shot, because even if it is too expensive, we can do this second point and move over our verification to be per user instead of per message and reduce the cost a ton. But at the very least, we could fix this problem that we're bleeding users on. So I go to implement ReCaptcha V3, knowing that we have a ton of credit for it. And I immediately start running into problems. ReCaptcha V3 is the most poorly documented piece of shit I've experienced in decades. I'm not exaggerating. It was hell. To this day, I cannot find a single page on the internet that I can recommend to anyone trying to implement ReCaptcha V3. I ended up with a GIST that worked relatively well that I wrote myself that I then sent to a bunch of my portfolio companies because it was so bad. I didn't trust the implementation. And when I told a company that it needed it, I didn't trust them to go figure it out and implement it right. It was so bad. It was horrifyingly difficult to get ReCaptcha V3 working, especially because once I did, it was actually really simple code. The V3 code was much nicer to work with than Turnstile in a lot of ways. Once you understood the utter chaos of how it was architected and you realized you had to ignore basically every single piece of documentation on it, then it became nice to work with. It had the best ergonomics in a lot of ways. It also had a much more reliable invisible mode. But it was also less privacy friendly because it's doing a ton of fingerprinting on who you are in order to make it as reliable as it was. It also meant it wasn't great in browsers that were trying really hard to protect your privacy. When you have ReCaptcha V3 in invisible mode, and you're using a browser like Brave, its reliability goes down a lot. Because ReCaptcha doesn't give you a yes or no, it gives you a scale, a score of 0 to 1. So if I take the token you gave me trying to generate a message and I hand it to ReCaptcha V3, it gives me back a score. 0.8 is what they say is high enough to be human. 0.7 is what everyone else does. We went with 0.5. We went that low because we saw a lot of users failing. And here are some fun numbers. 550,000 protected requests over the last 30 days. As I said, this shit ain't cheap. And that's also with the beta, which gets as much traffic as the main site, not using ReCaptcha for over a week of that. We're still seeing numbers that are absurd. So here is what the scores look like based on a given definition of risk. So we can see here that at 0.5, we had about 10,000 to 11,000 risky users that would fail versus 116K or so would pass. I can move this up or down and you can see how it affects the numbers. If we go up to 0.7, we end up with 22K almost are risky and 100K are safe. And if we go up to 0.8, which is what most people recommend, we end up with about a third of our requests, if not more, failing. That's horrifying that many of our users were getting risky scores consistently. Ugh. Really, really not good. This sucks. And I would encounter it too. I can't tell you how many times I would talk about T3 at an event. Somebody would pull out their phone to try it out quick and immediately hit a CAPTCHA fail on Safari on their iPhone. Absurdity. Horrifyingly bad. And I was so tired of this. A big part of why we had these failures was, again, the invisible nature of the CAPTCHA, the fact that it was hidden in the UI. If we could have presented a challenge conditionally to the user, this would have been mitigatable. If there was an option in ReCaptcha that was effectively run invisible unless you are low confidence in the user, then put a CAPTCHA challenge in their face and have them pass it, then send the token over to me, that would have been really nice. But Google does not offer such a thing. I would again have to have re-implemented all of this myself. I would have had to build a system that verifies the token. If it doesn't get a high enough score, kicks the user into a modal state that gives them a real challenge with a separate API key in a separate mode. They would then run the challenge, go hit this endpoint, get back a token or a fail, and if they get back the token, then they can chat for the next 24 hours. And I cannot tell you how many times I thought about sitting down and building all of this, building the infra that Google should have started with in the first place. I was like this close. I talked to some other friends running other startups about all of this. Enough of them said you should try hCaptcha that I said, fuck it. It can't be that much worse to implement. So I gave it a shot. hCaptcha's pricing is basically the exact same. It's $1 per 1,000 valuations. The difference being you have to pay them $100 a month to even get started with the professional tier, which we obviously need. The thing I was excited about was this guy, the 99.9% passive mode. What does that mean? It means that by default, for the vast majority of users, when you select that mode, it is invisible for them. And it will only give them a CAPTCHA challenge if it has reason to believe that user isn't real or not. It's much less granular on the API side. It just gives you the pass or fail when you hit them, but it prevents the user from submitting the token or even generating it in the first place until it has a relatively high confidence that they are passing it. So it kind of built that in-between step for me, where it could check if the CAPTCHA had been passed before making the user my problem. As such, the number of failures we've gotten on the server side where I check the token and get a fail, I think it's happened 4 times total since we implemented this change. Because the user doesn't even get to the step where they're submitting the token to us, because the hCaptcha JavaScript in the browser will check everything for them until the token gets generated and sent. And it does present challenges to users automatically if they fail the invisible check. None of that has to be my problem anymore. It was actually really nice. As an absolute slut for metrics, I had to put a lot of time in to try and visualize the success and failure of this. So here I have, at any given moment, the percentage of success and failure across hCaptcha in the T3 Chat beta and ReCaptcha in the T3 Chat production website. And here you can see it's actually been a lot better the last 24 hours. Previously, we'd see rates often get significantly worse on ReCaptcha. But you'll also see on hCaptcha, there's basically nothing, like comically so. Right now, the comparison is about 5% of ReCaptcha attempts are failed. Less than 0.4%, around 0.32% in the last 24 hours of hCaptcha attempts were failed. And if we look at the sheer number of failures over the last 24 hours, there has not been a single time where an hCaptcha challenge failed on our server in the last 24 hours, which means all of the failures had to happen on client side for different reasons. Like they opened the challenge because they weren't verified correctly, and the user just clicked the X button and left. That counts as a failure on hCaptcha. Once a user gives up on the challenge and leaves, it counts as a failure. And despite that, the failure rate is still less than 1/10 of the failure rate for ReCaptcha. If we weren't counting those and we only counted submission failures, which is what I did originally, the numbers were even more absurd. This was also during normal traffic hours for us. ReCaptcha was seeing a fail rate of 8 to 9%. hCaptcha was 0.1%. But hCaptcha's challenges suck. Nobody wants to do those. They're really annoying. Well, thankfully, almost no one has had to. In the last 24 hours, the hCaptcha challenge has been opened on T3 Chat 16 times. 16 times. That is it. The number of users who have ever seen one of these challenges is 20. Most users will never have to see one, and if they do, it's probably because they're on Brave. That is a massive, massive improvement for us. A lot of people were skeptical about these numbers because the beta has way fewer users than the production app. And I understand. There are 2 things to consider here. I'm doing percentages here, not hard numbers. The percentage gap is absurd. The other thing to consider is the fact that a ton of our users, and specifically our most powerful power users, have moved over to the beta. Roughly a third of our users have moved over fully, and those third of users make up a significant portion of our traffic. The beta has become very representative of our user base, and the percentage gap is still massive. On top of that, I monitor the reports of these things closely, and I haven't gotten a single report of a CAPTCHA issue on the T3 chat beta since we made this move, and we were getting reports dozens of times a day before. So is it a smaller number than the production app? Sure, some amount. That's not what I care about, though. What I care about is the vibe that people are getting blocked by it, and the amount of replies I get, the amount of complaints I get, the percentage of the traffic hitting this. And in every single metric I give a single fuck about, hCaptcha has been significantly better for us. And if it turns out I was wrong about this, once we make this live for everybody, I will be sure to issue a correction. I'll probably make a whole dedicated video about it, depending on how this one does. So yeah, this isn't just doing better because it's on beta. I know that because ReCaptcha was failing even worse in beta for us originally. So yeah, this is a representative sample, and it is a very, very, very good sample. While I'm here, I can't not offer a coupon code. So if you want to try out T3 Chat, the Pro tier, which has no captchas, by the way, and 1,500 messages a month on every single model you'd ever want to use, like literally all of them. Just look at this list. It's kind of crazy. Yeah, including all the new Claude models, by the way. Go check it out. And if you haven't signed up yet, you can get it for a month for just $1. If you use the code captchas at checkout, it's on the screen right now, and you've never signed up before, only $1 to get started for your first month. Kind of hard deal to beat. To get so many messages across all the best models, you should give it a try. Anyways, so what's wrong with hCaptcha? The integration must suck, right? Like that, there has to be something wrong. How is it so much better and everyone isn't using it? Great question. Let's go look at the implementation details. We first check if window.hCaptcha exists. Window.hCaptcha will exist as long as the JS has loaded. If not, I wait for up to 5 seconds for it to load. And if it's never there, then you have some weird shit going on in your browser preventing it. That's not my problem anymore. You fail. And yes, we are logging this as a failure. We're not even logging this as a fail for ReCaptcha. So there's a bunch of fail cases that I track on hCaptcha that we didn't with ReCaptcha, and it still scores worse. So once we have the hCaptcha binding, I create a container. I just throw it absolute hidden outside of the window, append it, because it needs to go somewhere. Again, this is what I mean when I say there's no good package for this. Like, why the fuck do I have to do all that? All of them have this problem to an extent, but annoying. And then we render the invisible widget. Create the widget ID, uses the public hCaptcha key. Size is invisible. I don't even know if that's necessary or not, but I think it is. The callback resolves the token, then calls the cleanup function. And then I added all of these for better tracking so I could know when users are hitting these fail cases. And then execute. That's it. If during this execution, it's unable to get enough data to confidently verify you, it pops up the challenge on the top of the UI without me having to do anything for it. It just goes. So nice. I was very impressed with how easy it was to get this implemented. Even if you had to do a lot of weird stuff around mounting things to the body and removing them and all the chaos that is using a JS tag inside of a modern React application. But all of them have this problem. Theirs was the least annoying to implement around. And most importantly, it had that one behavior I really, really wanted, which is to promote an invisible CAPTCHA up to a challenge on the cases where the invisible failed. Real quick jank chart where all of these stand across ease of integration, invisible mode, reliability, cost, documentation, and one more important one, the ability to promote out of invisible. Promote from invisible. That's what I'll call it. I don't want to steal hCaptcha's terminology, but it's a specific thing I was looking for that almost nothing supported. So we go through these. Ease of integration. Turnstile, I'll give it like a 6. ReCaptcha, I'm giving it like a 3. hCaptcha, I'll give it like a 7. None of them were great. Honestly, I would bump both of these down. I'm going to bump that to a 5. I'm going to bump this to a 6. Like, there's a lot that could have been done. None of them were great, but at least hCaptcha didn't make me want to die as much as the rest. Invisible mode reliability. Turnstile, I'm giving a 0 here. It just wasn't there. It's supposedly gotten significantly better since, but I've not had the interest in testing it because the risk is too high for us. ReCaptcha, I'll give it like a 4. This is the hot take that I didn't expect. hCaptcha's reliability on the invisible is really good. It almost always, for almost all users, passes the invisibility check there, which is nice. That you don't even need to show a user hCaptcha in order to verify them. That's most likely being human. There's cost. This is where Cloudflare wins by far. The only catch is that if you need more than like 2 Turnstile deployments, you have to move to enterprise, which sucks. Whereas with ReCaptcha, it's not as bad as I expected, but it's expensive. I'll give it a 4 because it hasn't cost us too much money, and the Google Cloud credits are nice. hCaptcha, I have to score a little lower, both because you don't have the cloud credits and that like expensive fee to start using it for real. It's cool that the free tier can work for small hobby projects, but once you hit that cap of like, what was it, 100K? Might even be less on the free tier, might have been 10K. Regardless, once you hit that cap, if you're not paying, you're screwed. So you basically have to pay up front, or you might have your app go down. Documentation, I kind of want to just go and give all of these zeros across the board. Gonna give Turnstile a 4. I'm gonna give ReCaptcha a 2 at best. No, that's a 1. It's so bad. It's so bad. And hCaptcha, I'm gonna give it a 7. I wish I could give more, but it was so hard for me to find details on how the 99.9% mode worked. There was just no documentation whatsoever. It turns out it does exactly what I wanted it to by default, but I couldn't verify that. That's another section I actually want to put in. I'm going to move this one down because testability in dev. This ended up being such a headache. It was so hard to figure out if these solutions worked. Turnstile, as quirky and annoying as it wasn't too bad here. It just sucked to have the dev console stolen from you constantly. ReCaptcha did not function for this at all. It was awful. hCaptcha, somewhere between the two. I'll give it a 4, leaning towards positive. The thing that hCaptcha does that's really nice is you don't have to tell it which URLs are supported like you do with all the others, which means it actually worked really well for things like preview environments. The move to hCaptcha fixed our Vercel preview so we could actually use them for testing, which was a really nice benefit. And then there is the support for promote to invisible. 0, 0, 10. This is the thing I was looking for the whole time. I thought I had to build myself. Because again, hCaptcha's docs on this are garbage. They do not do a good job of communicating that they have this feature, how it works, and what it does. But once you set it up right, it works exactly how it's supposed to. And it has been a huge quality of improvement, both in our error rates and in our user satisfaction. I legitimately expect our conversion to go up significantly upon rolling out hCaptcha in the production deployment, because it is so much better. I personally have not seen a challenge on any of my devices, on any of my browsers, and I was trying my hardest. I was using sketchy VPNs. I had Brave set up with all of the weird privacy extensions, and I still couldn't get it to turn into challenge mode. It just worked. It's so much better in experience. So if you take anything from this video, it should be that I'm now a hCaptcha shill. The documentation for all these things suck. But man, if you care about your experience for your users more than you care about $1 per 1,000 requests, you should use hCaptcha. ReCaptcha was close, but the combination of the invisibility failures and the shit docs makes it a hard recommendation. And Turnstile, I cannot recommend until they have both the promote from invisible stuff built in and they fix the reliability issues on the invisible mode. And I will emphasize once again, I have not tested this since January when we moved off. So it may have improved since, but I do not care enough to check at this point because moving back and risking the reliability of the service is not worth the $1,000 to $2,000 a month we could potentially save. One last fun thing. As I was looking up hCaptcha pricing, I scrolled a bit and found an old channel sponsor. hCaptcha Solver from Bright Data. They are not sponsoring this video. They have nothing to do with this. I just found it amusing that hCaptcha's Solver exists to automatically solve hCaptchas for you. What I found funny about it was the price. It's $1.50 for the first 1,000 times you use them to scrape past an hCaptcha. But if you are in the premium tier, it's only $1.05. Remember that it's $1 per 1,000 request verifications on hCaptcha. I just thought it was funny that it costs me $1 to block the traffic, and it costs harmful parties $1.05 to work around the block. So they pay 5 cents on the dollar more than me. They pay 5% more to get around the CAPTCHA. So now it's just a cost benefit analysis thing of, is the data worth more to you than to me by 5 cents? It's probably not worth it in our case because all you get if you escape that is the ability to use Gemini 2.0 Flash for free. And 1,000 requests on 2.0 Flash costs a similar amount there anyways. So yeah, for us, it makes sense. But you should be cognizant of cost targets and how much value is behind the things that users are requesting. Because if your data is worth more than $1.05 per 1,000 requests, you need a more significant solution. And one last shout out, because I really wanted to use this, it's just not quite ready for us yet. Radar by WorkOS seems very close to what we want. I actually really like the idea of fraud prevention being at a user account level. It would make a lot of things easier. It doesn't solve our signed out experience problems at all, but it would have made it much easier for signed in users to be tagged based on different behaviors and characteristics to figure out if they're a bot or not. WorkOS has been putting a ton of work into this product. I'm really excited to adopt it in the future once we start moving things over and get out of our chaotic auth setup that I should not have rolled myself. There are other options. I am excited the more I see them. All of that said, I am very happy with hCaptcha. It's the perfect fit for what we need, and there's a good chance it'll fit well for you. I cannot recommend these right now. And if you need something more serious than hCaptcha, I would recommend looking into stuff like Radar. I think I've covered everything I have to say about all this. It has been a chaotic journey. I've spent way too much time thinking about CAPTCHAs, and now I've spent way too much time complaining about them. I hope this is useful to somebody, because what a journey it has been. Let me know what you guys think. And until next time, hope you can pass this challenge.